Block 25 on Highway 12, the acquisition cost is estimated at $175,000, and I think you all saw that email perhaps from Aaron in regard to that would be the source of these figures. The corner business estimated at $60,000. Environmental concerns, it was the site of the former cleaners. It's been cleaned and approved. Other lots are unknown for possible hazards, including the city-owned parking lot. The cost to move the T1 fiber optics would be $200,000. So the estimated cost there for Block 25 would be $435,000 for an acquisition cost. Okay. For the current City Hall, where we're sitting at this moment, there are no acquisition costs, of course. The environmental concerns are none, and it would be removed in the demolition process. The cost to have the T1 fiber optic would be $75,000. Staff would need to be relocated in the interim, and that's estimated at $50,000. It's being referenced here that we would use city, county, and government offices with no rent costs. The moving would be done internally. There would be some minor remodeling that would need to be done to make that $50,000.
Oh, I see. We now at least have a estimate for the demolition of this building.
And that demolition would be $120,000 to $220,000 using the higher number. The estimated cost being $345,000.
Was anybody given an update on where the demo cost came from?
It would be nice to know the source of all of these numbers and how confident we are in them, how much variance there might be. I would note in the relocation costs, it would be interesting to know where we're going to be relocating people to, which of our buildings and how spread out people will be.
The wastewater buildings, I know we talked about, and we don't know if maybe some of the county offices.
I heard the same about the wastewater, the old wastewater treatment plant building would be a possible location, temporary location. Behind, over where the school bus garage is and the old waste.
Building?
Okay, hi there.
Welcome. Here you go, Sarah. That's your spot. And you have very good timing. We'll go through these and then we'll with the updates, and we've got one more, and then we'll come back and maybe you can shed a little bit more light on the source of some of the numbers and how confident we are in them. If you are aware of that, you might not know that Ike is not able to join us. He's
Yes.
not home sick.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't know, was there any consideration for the auditorium for housing staff?
Potentially IT. Yeah, I think it's been looked at in a couple different ways.
So there'd be some inefficiency issues with that, and concerns perhaps, and convenience for the public to be able to find us. The Hardware Hank building and acquisition cost estimated at $400,000. Environmental concerns being none. The cost to move the T1 fiber optics would be $125,000. So estimated costs at $525,000. Okay, Sarah, could you shed some light on the source of the numbers? How confident we are, and if, going back, let's say, to the fire station block, do you know if there were actual conversations with the owners of those buildings to obtain those numbers, or, property taxes, or?
I would assume at this point that property taxes have been used. I know that there was some preliminary conversations with Aaron Backman, of conversations that he's had with just of his previous knowledge of conversations that have happened with property owners in some of these areas as well. I was not really involved with the numbers side of these presentations, so I cannot definitively tell you the source of some of them.
My only thought on that is, if we go back to the email we got on the Nelson property, the tax thing was much lower than what the, you know, this estimated profit, the value that we would pay. So they're not just going by the tax estimate.
Is there any discussion about relocation costs of those businesses or at all? It's just
Again,
tax value of the property is as far as we've done on that.
I haven't had any conversations, I mean, the administrator and I had a conversation in regards to relocation of staff. I had asked him to see if it would be possible to, look at, do we have existing facilities or are there facilities that we would have access to at minimal to no cost, is what I had asked him. And then he told me that he would bring it to his leadership team. And then he and I had a conversation, I believe it was Tuesday, and I believe at that time he said that the leadership team had come up with the relocation expenses, but he didn't talk to me about any of these numbers, so I don't know where any of these numbers came from.
I'm curious about the actual existing businesses on the fire station block. Any dislocation kinds of things, if we're moving existing businesses from those sites.
Well, that goes into the, yeah, goes into the
To-
cost.
Right.
To rebuild, and the estimate being 453,000, it's
That's, yeah.
like a very conservative number in my opinion.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So, are you thinking we might have to pay them some
I'm
relocation
wondering,
costs, is that what you're
yeah,
asking?
has that been even thought of? Because, I mean, those are established businesses.
With the First Street presence.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would imagine there's more than just a land acquisition.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I can tell you the Block 25 from an email that I just, that I was copied in. Those numbers were pulled from, estimates from Aaron Beckman.
Right.
I would think these numbers are maybe drastically higher if you were to consider relocating established businesses. And I don't know what city's obligation would be, but that's something we have to consider from that particular spot.
So we'll recognize that these are numbers that are a good place to start, but we might want to have them fine-tuned before we make final decisions. So, but thank you to staff for putting this together and organizing it in a very quick and efficient way for us to be able to review it.
Okay, question. Are we going to throw in the parking lot?
Well, that hadn't been talked about yet, because that just
Right.
came up yesterday, so if you wanna throw that up, because, so there's another site that the administrator had sent to Julie and I yesterday, so I'll let Julie take it from there.
Well,
There's a
the,
birthday next
just to the east, the parking lot that's,
South of the
south of
Mason
to this
building.
Mason, I keep wanting to say Shriners, the Mason building.
They're both.
Yeah. I could just, was questioned when we were going around the first round with the city hall, why we had eliminated that, and I agree with Marv through the emails, I don't remember discussing that lot, but, or why it would have been eliminated, but, so he was thinking of a 2 or 3 story building there.
So this is out the back door.
Do you want me to pull the GIS up?
Yeah, that would really be great.
That was the original site of our library, wasn't it, before our library relocated? So I'm kicking it.
It was before my time.
I don't know.
All right.
Yeah.
No, the library wasn't.
Right next to the Mesa building?
Library was a
Small
standalone building.
footprint.
Two steps
Yep.
up this
Those
way.
are nice lots.
And then what do you do with all their windows that face out to that parking lot, that building right next to it?
You mean the Mason building?
Yeah,
Yeah, they're on the kind of lower part of that.
there's windows all the way up, because I drove by it on the way here, and I'm thinking, okay, so they just lose all that window view?
Is that large enough?
So-
Ike thought it was,
The property,
yeah. you went 2 or 3 stories.
yeah, well, and it depends on if you stay within the actual parcel that's there, so, this is the
Yeah.
parcel that he's looking at,
Yes.
but we also own this parking lot, directly west of that, so, I mean, it might look a little funny, I mean, ideally, ultimately you technically could go past that footprint. You would just have to like get some parcel combination, which is not a big deal, and you would lose an entrance. Off of Becker Avenue, you have that one entrance east of the dentist's office if you went larger than that footprint. But that other than a line on a piece of paper, technically there's nothing holding you back from staying here.
Does that line show the setbacks, Sarah, or?
What do you mean by setbacks?
Well, because the line looks like it's partially into the sidewalk there, which we wouldn't want to do, of course. But-
Right.
And do you know what that footprint
My
is? Can you
measurement, I
measure that
think,
out
was
quick?
from the edge of the building to the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Because it's central business district, setbacks are 0, so you could
Right.
build straight up to the sidewalk. That's generally how we look at wanting.
Can you pull up that square footage?
That was, by the way, the site of the Carnegie Library
Okay,
back in history, for those interested.
Wow.
we tore down a Carnegie.
Oh my gosh. Do you remember that, Julie?
No, I
You hear that?
don't.
Oh, I remember it as a kid. It was a beautiful building. So,
My hometown still has, Madison still has their Carnegie.
Yeah. Marshfield has one.
Litchfield's theirs as well.
But isn't it commercial now?
Yeah, it is, but.
Yeah, it's still there,
It's
yeah.
kinda turned into a
Ours
restaurant
was,
for a
ours
while.
was kinda like, just like that.
Oh, really? Yeah, cool.
We're looking at like 50 by 75. Roughly.
Okay,
I think yesterday we said 60 by 70, and I would have to look at.
yeah, well, just rough
Oh,
numbers.
but
So that's
roughly,
3,700 square feet.
how much?
So you only go into 10,000 square
3,700.
feet with 3 stories.
Anyone feeling like this is a really strong site we want to consider?
I think we have to talk about it. I mean, you've got who owns a parking lot to the west?
This?
Well,
Right there.
We do,
That's
we
our
do.
property. Yep.
Right.
and then the dental office has, what, 4 slots?
No, this is
No,
actually
it's
owned by
Christensen.
Christensen.
Or Christensen's, yeah.
Yep. So this is owned by Christensen. This parcel is city. This parcel is city. That's a parking lot right now. This is the dental office, and then this is the current site. So you've got the building in white, and then this is the parking lot.
I've got, there's land there. I mean, there's a L shape, I don't think we can just nix it because we're talking about that small piece.
Thank you. I like that we own it, and I made that known last time, but versus some of these other options that have such huge costs, there's no land acquisition cost here, and you're not necessarily limited by just what you've highlighted in blue.
Mhm.
When you own the parking lot next to it, there is an ability to make that footprint a little larger if that's what you deem necessary. So I have no problem with this. It's all in that same block that we have kept on the table here, so.
I think if the block is on
What-
that body.
What do we want to call this site?
Former Carnegie Library site.
No, don't go there.
Oh,
God hurts, God hurts, call it what you will.
Fifth and Becker.
Fifth and Becker, is that what we'll refer to it as?
There you go.
Sarah, could you just pull that out to here and just go that way?
Yeah.
Because I think that's gonna probably give us about what?
Because of the dental building there.
That's yeah,
And then you're like 6,000 square feet. It's a little off, but 50 by 120, 115.
Yeah, I understand this is just rough numbers,
Yeah.
6,000. Well, then you get down to three floors, you get to 18,000 square feet, which is what our goal was when we originally talked, it was 9,000 double, so we were looking at 18,000 square feet is what we're hoping to get. In the first conversation, right, Julie? We were talking about England?
So we would ask staff to put together these same numbers for Fifth and Becker as we have for the other sites then, okay?
I would agree, but just on the comments that were just made, that 18,000 number that I just heard, there was a rationale for that, probably, and can we get maybe what was put, I don't need that right now, but if that's the number I'm looking for,
I think I've got it right here.
yeah, okay. Maybe get a copy of that so I know what.
It's in here,
we're
isn't it?
looking-
Probably.
I believe so.
Oh, is it?
If I remember
Yeah.
seeing that.
All right.
So, where that came from was, when we directed, I'm sorry, Councilmember Thomas.
No, please, go ahead, Mr.
Um,
Mayor.
When we worked on it the first time around, one of the things that we asked Ingan to do was to survey staff on their needs. And then they took their needs and then they put it into a spreadsheet based on best practices for usable space. And so that's how the number was derived. And so it wasn't a number that was, it wasn't an end number we were looking for. It was a front-loaded number, and then the number came out at the end.
Okay. And then that 18,000, that includes the council chambers, I would assume, as well?
What was the final number there? Sarah, see, you have it right.
I'm seeing a total number of 20,000, but I'm struggling to confirm if that's actually the column we're supposed to be looking at.
But, well, I guess I can go and check it myself, but we're not talking about, these were not arbitrary. There were some assumptions that are based on this,
There
to
was
get to
a
that number.
study done.
Conversation
And
with
so-
staff.
Yeah, yep, they were in here and talked to all of us.
Measured everybody. And so the other thing that happened, and I mean, and so like, take for an example, the RAC 8 portion of the conversation. They were looking at needing 2,500 square feet as an example. So there was no whittling done, or there was no justification done. It was just, we were just at fact finding at that point. So we hadn't really whittled any of the numbers down and said, well, you know, yeah, you got 2,500 square feet now, but can you really get by with 1,800 square feet or 1,500?
Are there any other questions in regard to the information provided by staff in regard to the various sites, what we have in the packet?
Going to the block 25, thank you, Highway 12. I just want to, you know, I think we have to be aware that it was a long-term, under a 100-year-old business. It was a cleaning business for the majority of that time, so I want to make sure we're aware of that so that we're not caught off guard that there might be something there that we don't know about as far as possible environmental hazards. I think.
Mr. Mayor, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so what ended up happening is there was another building that was looking at going there,
Mhm.
and there were some environmental concerns. So I talked to Bruce about this before he
Mhm.
retired. So all of those environmental concerns have been taken care of, and all the mitigation has been taken care of on those 4 pieces of property. So if you're talking specifically on the other 2 pieces of property, that we wouldn't know, you're correct with that.
No, I was concerned about where the footprint of the cleaners was.
Yeah, that's all been cleaned up,
And
yeah.
the soil and that sort of thing, that's what I was concerned. I want to make sure that we're not blindsided or something. Okay,
And I don't
thank
know
you.
about compaction and stuff, you know anything about that, Sarah?
I'm not sure.
Bruce and I never talked about that.
Yeah, I know that the MPCA, we finalized some of that cleanup just this past year, but it was finalized
Okay,
for
right.
that, for those 3 or 4.
I just want to have that peace of mind. Thank you, thank you.
Good question. Got us all on the same page.
Sarah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Councilman.
Thank you. If I'm looking at this footprint piece, that block 25, because there's a multiple lots there. Do we have to get to that 18 to 20,000 square feet idea? Do I have to consider all of that block? Or can you see for just the stretch that belongs to the city? And then if I add on the next parcel, I'm just kind of curious.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
No, you're just. So the current parking lot.
This is cool.
This is great.
It's great to have someone who knows how to use it.
Current
Yeah,
parking
that is
lot's
true.
22,000 square feet.
So without any acquisition, we have adequate size for that design and what the number you're talking about. Oh, I see.
That would be the parking, and then the current 3 parcels owned by the Nelson family is about 15,000 square feet.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, what were you talking about, the parking?
We have to consider, we can't take the parking away. We have to consider parking when we're gonna build a new site.
Sure.
So we have to, so we can't eliminate all the parking lot, is what I was just saying.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we don't have to leave all the existing parking either,
Right, but I mean, you can encroach on that.
yeah, so we don't have, I mean, we wouldn't have to purchase the entire, all of the lots that are laid out here based on how big you want to park. That's,
So the parking lot was 15,000 square feet, one level?
22,000 square
22,
feet,
okay.
1 level, and then the Nelson, just the Nelson
Yeah.
family property is the 15.
I got it.
And then the other 2, the Wodash property is about 7,500 square feet, just for sake of having it.
Does Vodash own both those two?
Yeah. That would be 8,000 square feet, just that first parcel.
Any other questions in regard to that?
What'd you say excuse me, what'd you say the parking lot, that square footage over there is?
22,000.
22, okay, thank you.
Do,
Councilmember Osmus.
if we took half of the city-owned parking lot
Yeah.
and went with a 2 or a 3-story there on the property we already own, I imagine that's about 10 or 12.
Yeah, then we're at about
So-
11,000 square feet, which is a 75 by 150
Yep.
building.
And then if we went 2 stories, we'd have 22 to 24,000. Is that enough parking then in that part?
Well, Sarah would have to calculate that based off the size of the building, so.
Yeah, I'd have to get numbers from engineering of what,
Okay.
I'm trying to think of what we normally calculate per parking space.
Because, I'm just trying to think of like municipal utilities. I mean, the biggest thing I think that we need for parking is for city council meetings.
Yeah.
But we still have the option of, the county office building parking just to the west as well.
Yes. It would, just preliminary looking at this, it would probably make sense to do the west half of that, and then make your entrance off of Benson, because entrance along Third is probably not very wise. Leave that entrance here that's already along Benson, which would make parking on this half of the county, the east half of the county parking lot, that much closer to the building.
what's the installation of a crosswalk with its cost?
250.
$50,000? Because I would assume that would have to happen at that location. If we could come across that, or just do that.
So and those numbers are probably, that's when we looked at it, the first year was, that you were on the council, it was the first year when CCS came and asked us for that, over by Deep Free and.
And a quick trip build, that would be a very busy one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, I'm gonna move us on, looking at the time, to the next item on our agenda, and that being an evaluation of the priorities. Staff was kind enough to include for us the work that we did at the retreat in an effort to honor that work and use it as a launching pad for looking at priorities and the factors we want to consider. What I'd like to do is walk us through an exercise in which we will take a look at those priorities that were already identified, consider any other factors that we want to take into account. Then we're going to rank those factors from most important to least important, and then talk about any additional information that we're going to need related to those factors to make a sound decision, okay? Last thing I want to do is to ask staff to come back with bits and pieces here and there, so let's tell them right up front what we want, okay? So, what I did is try to take the information from the planning retreat and put it into groupings. If you recall the exercise with the Oprah Winfrey gig. So I put in things that I thought were related to the cost of the site, items that were related to economic development, traffic and visibility, parking, and then those items that really relate to efficiency for our office functions and such. So just to review these items, to refresh our memory, is the acquisition cost, and I'm going to note that there were some additional items that were added into this, but demolition costs, displacement of the employees, an impact to the city tax roll, so what are we going to miss on property taxes going forward? Do we own it versus lease it? The site preparation and environmental concerns, and the cost of putting in the T1 line, okay? Then we also said, is it connected to the auditorium? Are there internal department efficiencies? And that idea of having a one-stop shop. And remember, we threw these items up. We didn't necessarily all agree and own them, but we put them up as talking points. Then in regard to the parking, ample and convenient parking, convenient and accessible traffic flow, and high visibility. Then from an economic development standpoint, is it a catalyst for city improvement, residential co-location, and does it stimulate economic development? Okay? So, I'm going to give us a couple minutes to talk about this, think about it. What else are we missing?
One of the things that I believe we have to be aware is, I know we want to put try to put as much as we can into the site. But I'm concerned that if we move something, and I'm going to say it, if we move the Rack 8 from where it currently is located to this location, we have the potential to lose a source of funding for the city by opening a door for the cable company to renegotiate their contract with us. I believe over the last 12 to 13 years, maybe 15 years, we've acquired or been paid close to $3 million. And of that money, a large portion of that goes to the city's general fund. So that's going to be something that we have to think about long and hard before we make that move.
Can I ask a question of that?
Yes, sir.
Unless something changed in the budgeting process, it doesn't go into the general fund.
Okay.
It's a RAC 8 fund.
Right.
There was a period of time when the dollars were moved from the RAC 8 fund into the general operating, which was correct.
Mm-hmm.
But we would not lose the franchise agreement if we went to a new location. Those costs would just be assessed to a different location. The other part of that comes in that we don't have a current contract because they refused to sign the contract. So we are not under contract with them.
Right.
Because they refused to sign our contract.
Correct,
And
correct,
so we've sent them numerous contracts that they've rejected.
correct,
So,
that's correct.
so they could have, I mean, they could walk in to the office today and say, we're out. So I think it's something to look at, but we need to make sure that the numbers we're looking at are correct.
Correct.
I know, having worked in other cities, those costs can be attributed, particularly if you have, I mean, the site has to be defined, this is the RAC 8 area, which we would do, of course, but, and I'm calling it RAC 8, regional access cable.
Right,
Anyways, I'm talking too much.
right,
Okay,
but,
what I'm gonna ask is if I can bring you back, just knowing that we have limited time to the
Mhm.
process. One of the items that we will do last after we've prioritized this is say, what more information do we need on each of those? And so that's why I write up here, let's find out how that would affect that contract, okay? So
Yeah.
it's a good point to have, an item for us to consider, but, right now I'd just like to ask, are there other items that we're missing?
I don't know how to frame it, but as I'm looking back at what we generated at the retreat, one piece under features and amenities, the chamber council, council chambers on site. I brought up the last one, that was an additive to a need, and we've never addressed that as a council. That's something we probably should address. And then the determined footprint and size, a lot of our conversation has been about that. And I would imagine that is linked to function and what we plan to do with it. So I would think council chambers falls underneath that as well. And it sounds like we probably have put something together that explains what exactly we're gonna have in the building, but that's one of the options, but that determines the footprint as well. So that would be one thing I would think would be added. One of those concern pieces, I would be remiss if I did not mention it because it was brought to my attention. Any relocation, we do have Mid-Minnesota Development Commission that is also in the building. They need to be considered in any kind of a situation where we were to vacate this premises even temporarily, that we have an obligation for that contract as well.
Do we know, how long out that contract is, or what we're committed to?
We just signed a new one, Julie, I don't remember when it was, and I don't remember how long it is.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Okay. Anything else in being able to make this decision? Okay, then I'm gonna ask you to rank these in priority order. What is most important to you in making this decision, okay? Critical, right in the middle of the line, to, you know what, this is, it could be something that is, no matter where we're at, it's something that would pertain to all of the sites. It's not unique to one particular site perhaps, and I think we have a couple of those there. I wanted to honor all of the items that were discussed. We had one particular location that we did not choose to talk about going forward, that it was raised that we do co-location with residential. Is that still important to us or not, given the sites that we're talking about now? So the way I want you to vote on this is each of you have the dots here. We're going to do it in a stoplight, if that helps you to think about it. Green is go, yes, this is really important to me. The red being it's either consistent with all of them, so it's not a priority item to necessarily discuss, but it might want to become a parking lot item that we do want to address at some point, okay? And the yellow is somewhere in between. Now, you can use any of the stickers 2 times on one site, but you cannot put more than 2 stickers per item, okay? Per factor. And you don't have to use all your stickers if you don't want to. But what we're trying to do again is to find out what's most important to all of us, okay? Any questions about that?
Is this isn't in concrete, is it, right now? And the reason I'm asking that question is, this might be information that the public might like to see. You know what I'm saying? So that this might be opening a door for conversation. So I don't know that,
We would expect to have community meetings and have community input, but what we're trying to do is create a base for us to be able to bring to the community for feedback, okay? So, you know, if cost is a priority, that's where you put your dots, or any combination thereof, okay? So whenever you feel ready, you're welcome to come on up and put your dots out.
I just have one question, so to go off of a little bit what Fernando said. So, I mean, when we go to the community, we could just say to them, these were things we talked about, and still have that conversation opener, if you will. But what I'm hearing you say is that you're trying to get us to move as a committee, because that's kind of where we got wrapped around the axles, is when we started having to make some decisions, we kind of got wrapped around the axles.
What I'm really trying to do is give us all a similar vision, know where our priorities are. You know what, one item might be important to Julie, but it's not so important to me. But if it's important to all the rest of you, then we need to honor that, right? And if something is less important, well, and we all consider it a less important item, then it's not something we need to spend a lot of time on, right? But we will use these priorities and then taking a look at each individual site so we can evaluate each site based on these factors and these priorities. And those things that are more heavily weighted should have more consideration when we're looking at the individual sites. So what I'm trying to do here is neutralize anyone's incoming impressions of where, you know what, I have in my mind, this is where I want it to be. But let's look at what's really most important, and let's select the site off of those things that we agreed were most important. Councilmember
I understand it, and I think it's a fine way to go. I just want to point out that the middle there says new city hall building. This one says site for the new city hall. That whatever we come up with here, realize the reason we are here is because we do have an existing situation here, and that we do know there's a price tag for here as well. And so when we're done, I'm hoping that we'll be comparing the two of those things to talk about why we're going in one direction or the other.
Okay.
Okay. On the one-stop shop, I had a question about that when we said it as well. Because don't we have everything here now, other than Rack 8? Or
I think
what are
what was
we?
talked about, I think what was talked about is when we were having that conversation, there was a I'm sorry, you're the one that brought it up.
No, go
I'm
for it.
sorry.
Go ahead.
See if I heard you correctly.
Yeah, feel free.
So there was conversation about moving Public Works
Right.
away from the city hall function. And
Oh.
the concern was, so that was on the agenda. And so what I heard the concern being is that we have to make sure that our citizenry have one place to go and we don't send them all over town. That's what I heard.
Okay.
Is
I
that
just
correct?
didn't.
Absolutely correct, because
Yeah.
there seems to be, as we're doing these things, oh, the community center here, civic center here, we keep
Right.
moving the staff, everybody, and we shouldn't have to be running all over the city to get city business done.
Okay.
So we may have functions elsewhere, but we have one central location where if John Q. Citizen moves to town, or a citizen that lives in town has a question, they can go to one location and get the answers they need and not be shopped around the community. That's what I heard.
I know there was a discussion on here about having all the public safety heads co-located here, and that just doesn't make sense to me, but that, okay.
That was discussed.
It is
but-
It was, it was
Okay.
discussed, but I
Oh.
don't think
That was
there was
everyone's
consensus.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for us to identify what we mean by this one-stop shop and,
Yeah.
and realize that we are not necessarily talking about police and fire. Okay, all
Right,
right,
right.
very good. Okay, so whenever you're comfortable with it, go ahead and
Don't go the other way.
put your dots.
I'm not one that's shy to make a decision. Might have been the background I came from.
oh, you're fine. Okay. so we can use all our greens if we want, or just two?
But you can
You
use
can
all of
all
them, you
of
just can't put
Okay.
more than 2 on any one
Okay,
given
okay.
factor.
I can't put them on the parking lot.
Ah,
Yeah, you can put on the parking lot if
Alright.
you want, can't he?
I'll put my sticker where I want, all right.
yeah.
All right, let's
Yeah.
move that. Let's move that off of the parking lot then,
All right.
okay?
I validated something. All right. What's yellow mean?
You're in between.
All right.
It's,
All right.
Sarah doesn't get to win.
oh yes, Sarah, you should. You're part of this committee. You should join in on this. Thank you for
I'm
asking
looking
that. I
at
didn't even
home,
realize.
like, that's a
Oh,
priority
yes.
over lease. That's how I'm
Right.
reading that.
Well, yes, yes.
So we did have two
And-
businesses that came to us and said, if you wanted us to build a building, we would lease it to you. So that's why that's up there.
Okay.
Just to let you know.
Well, that's not that we own the property already, or we're not having to, that would be acquisition. All right.
And just a thought is, that's common to every site you choose.
Right.
Well, not, I guess, if we.
Because there was the discussion
building
about going, let's
itself.
say, yeah, going to Candy Mall. So leasing, you know.
Right.
But even if we built it on the city site, you could still be leasing the building, have someone else financing it for you, so is that important to you or not? Oh, can I take one of those back? Somewhere. Can we say that's green?
I got an extra green, what's it worth to you?
Yeah. Okay. Guess I don't need to. Let's see.
I think your ones with 1 year in are probably next, because they don't have acquisition and new ones.
Right.
Right.
We've got Well, the yellows are indifferent, right? So.
Yeah, I think those bottom two you have, where you got four, the ones that have nobody on them, the
You're
square
right.
footage and the rack 8 one, those need to move over, because there's nobody that's ambivalent to them, so they would have a higher score than the other two.
Gotcha.
Not just counting.
Just opposite, okay.
Right, not counting just the green.
Okay. I can agree with that. Is that what you?
They dropped,
The
they
top
dropped
one you want.
they dropped one that's on the floor.
Oh, thank you. I've stuck someone up there all by their
I think they put
themselves.
that one between.
Right in here?
Right there, yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
You want us to tell you what to do anymore?
Gotta love the sticky
You're
walls,
doing a
right?
great job.
All right. Okay, so then what I want you to do is say, are there any of these that are duplicated, or any of these, really we didn't have very many of the red ones, but anything with the red on it that you say, you know what, this is common to all the sites, and that's why I put my red sticker on it, but I still want to talk about it at some point. Or are they just low level and don't need to spend time on it?
I will tell you, I was confused about own versus lease, I did not know what that meant. I was looking at where the city owns property versus having to rent from somebody else, not leasing it, the building, or whatever else is a concern, so.
You want this
So
to
were
be-
you the green dot on there?
No, I was
Is that what
not.
you said?
No.
Okay.
I was the green dot on there.
I was not, but
Okay,
for me, mine's covered under acquisition costs, so I was just
Okay.
confused, I may not have put any sticker on that.
Is there anyone here who feels that we should be exploring the lease option and want to talk about it, find out what costs would be, the differences of whatever?
Not after looking at this, you know, I thought that it was something we should maybe look at. I thought about maybe the Candy Mall, and I thought about these two businesses that came to us and said, hey, we'd like to build a building for you if you consider a lease, because that could spur economic development. That was my reasoning for that, but I'm fine with taking that off and changing my green to a red.
Okay, so I'm gonna just put these down literally. Are you the residential? Anyone want that one? Okay, all right. Okay, the rest of them we will talk about. So now what I'd like to do is identify, go through each one of these and say, this is what more information we need staff to provide us so that we can make a really informed decision, okay? So that, we have estimated acquisition costs. How are you feeling, and are we good with saying we want something more concrete in regard to these?
I think we have to wait until we select the site, because otherwise they're just chasing rabbits.
Okay, all right, so we've got enough
Well,
to,
I mean, but I think we have to be in a ballpark. If you're telling me we're based on tax rolls, I am fine with that. But then, if we're gonna have any kind of, as part of that acquisition would mean existing businesses at any of these sites, if you're displacing somebody, I do need a cost associated with that. Again, it doesn't have to be exact, but it's gotta be somewhere, so we have a number to deal with.
and
Obviously,
do we
we'll-
know if they're interested in selling or not?
Exactly, I mean, I agree we don't have to have an exact cost there necessarily, but we do have to have some kind of a parameter.
To make a decision.
And then if you pick a site, then obviously you can refine that.
Part of the concern I have is, let's say that we go and talk to a particular business and we say, hey, we're looking at your building. And then they're not even thinking of it, and then they say, oh geez, maybe I should close. I don't think it'll happen on any of these sites that we're talking about.
Your best time to get an estimate is probably when they know you're looking at other sites too, rather than this is the site we want to go with and committed to it. I'd like to know if they're even interested in selling them. Okay. Okay with that one? Anything else? How about parking?
I've got an estimate that people are talking about here of square footage of a building. I'd like to know what the parking size has to be as well.
The equivalent parking parameter, whatever.
If I say number of parking spaces required, that's by the square footage.
Yeah.
And then also the number that are available, okay? And how about secondary parking? Because when we're talking about parking, county parking across the street, okay?
Alternative parking.
Anything else in regard to that? Okay. Interdepartmental efficiency.
Wasn't there talk that we wanted to have, city planning and EDC close by and working together? Those different parts of the puzzle, I think by being together, you're going to streamline a lot of conversations.
I think, in my mind, you can incorporate that one-stop shop in with the interdepartmental efficiencies and those little things, however you do business, and make those things work. I think all those can be folded.
So are we, this is important to all of us, but is it important and it's something that would be the same for every building we go into? Or are we saying, if we can only fit, if this has to be 2 stories versus 3 stories, how does it fit on the site? Or are we just believing that it's gonna fit on the site and this is important to us, but it's gonna be common for all sites? You understand what I'm asking?
Well, I totally do, because I'm sorry, I don't want to monopolize, but that square footage per site, I believe, falls into that as well, because it's all basically of what you're gonna be doing in the building. That's what all of those are talking about. What you're gonna do in the building determines how you're gonna have the one-stop shop set up. It's gonna determine how you're gonna work it efficiently. That is basically a function thing you're writing. It's what the building's gonna do. And that's why you have a site that's a certain size.
So, I see it kind of 2 different ways. To me, the internal department is the people working in the building. The one-stop shop is the community coming in and their accessibility to different departments.
They're 2 different things, but they're
But
cumulative of both, of any site you choose, correct? I mean, to me, they are.
They should be inclusive to any site we choose, correct?
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I agree with.
But they are separate, I agree with you, Julie, they're separate issues. So
Despite
part of
being-
this is
yeah.
a management tool.
Yeah, but despite being separate issues, there's still, I mean, the issues are gonna exist anywhere they go, and it's still gonna have a certain size parameter of what you're gonna put in that building, and what it's gonna be doing, and which ones are still gonna be peripheral and outside. That's not gonna change, so I see them, it's all a functionality square. And I don't think it's gonna change my thing.
So for us to be able to make a decision on that, is it based on how that building can fit on the site and how many square footage we have for that building site?
If they've defined what the activities are going to be in this building, then there would be a footprint that you would define as what that is. Now, we arbitrarily pull a size out of the air.
Right.
Then we haven't addressed that square. And I'll go do my homework on that piece. And, it's got to address what the functionality of the building is expected to be.
And it really needs to be defined farther down the road, right? With greater conversation.
Absolutely.
We've got a small point to start with,
Right.
but it's gonna need to be refined.
Part of that discussion, I would like to include who would, if we were gonna relocate engineering or somebody out by Public Works. Because there is an argument there, and I don't know how that impacts the public coming to the building as much as it is their communication. That's who wanted to go out there, right? Yes. Because I
This
think, you
is,
know,
this is really a common theme, because it's gonna have to be a different footprint if we have engineering move, if we have the EDC move, if we keep our renters in the building, those are all. So are we going to expect to have these questions answered before we decide on a site? Or, you know,
You certainly should. That's the difference between looking at buying up a whole block versus just putting it on an existing lot that the city owns. That's what we keep coming back to, that's where the questions sit out there is.
having to know what space we need.
Exactly.
so then, would we be able to say, what is the maximum size of a building that we could fit on the site for the parking that is required, whether primary or secondary, so that we can at least take it into account? Does that sound fair?
You're gonna have to, I think that's exactly, because if you throw all those extra things in this facility, I would imagine the parking never changes.
Isn't parking based on square footage?
Here's the caveat, because it's a government building, the zoning ordinance does not have a specific requirement. It's kind of up to planning commission and staff recommendation of what that number should be. So I think there's a little bit of digging and some thought that needs to go into that number, because I think there's several, again, depending on what uses are in the building, how many employees are here, you know, if you're thinking about that one-stop shop, how, you know, if you're, right now, we take parking tickets, right, and there's some other functions like that people can come to city offices and take care of that business. So if we're increasing that function, how much foot traffic are we thinking about increasing? Does that mean that we need 10 extra parking spaces for that use, kind of thing? I think you can pitch several different arguments to planning commission as to what they would consider adequate.
So Sarah, do you think you are able to fill this for us?
Yeah,
To do something?
what I would do is I'd probably look at some other office uses and what the zoning ordinance looks at for that, of that sort of frequent foot traffic, but also having staff, and kind of base it off of some of those other uses, so.
Okay, thank you. So, catalyst for city improvement. Is this something that's gonna be unique to a particular site, or is this gonna be consistent for each of the sites that we're choosing?
I feel like each site is the same. I mean, no matter where it went, it's a new building for the downtown. A nice looking building for the downtown.
So is this something we're going to need any more information on, and is it something that we need to spend time talking about when we look at the individual sites?
I don't know how that one's measurable, to be really honest with you.
Yeah, I don't either. And
That'll come up in the end, after it's built and somebody goes only buckets.
do I have your permission to put it down here then?
I didn't think it was gonna come up with this.
Yeah, I think it will, wherever it goes, it's gonna be an improvement.
Yeah, okay. We got it. Okay, impact to city tax rules.
That's important.
We can quantify this by what they're paying in current property taxes, so that's what we would look for, right?
You can get that for us, right, Sarah?
Yep.
Okay. Demolition costs, we've got an estimate on that, so
They were still.
how well refined that
Yeah,
was?
exactly, I think we might want
The
to
source of that?
double
Yeah.
check that.
Yeah.
And I would imagine.
I guess my question on that,
Go ahead.
my question on that is, we don't want staff chasing rabbits. And so until we have a site located, I don't think we want them to zero in. mean, they've given us their best guess at this point. And my understanding is that these numbers came from an engineering firm, so. it was-
Okay, that helps
We didn't
to
know
know
that.
that, we did not know that. But I'm thinking 3 of the sites, whether, or 2 of the, 3 of the sites, well, quite frankly, we could be demolishing the building regardless of where we build, right?
That's what I was
And
just
they
gonna
creating
point out.
that additional parking. So, that hadn't even been a thought to me before this, so,
Cause I was curious, why did that only get put on the current city hall offices? It's
Because
gonna
it
get
goes hardware.
demolished
Hank,
no
that-
matter where it is.
or do we expect to keep it inside? Parking lot.
Well, and plus, though, you do have demolition costs on other sites that have existing structures on them. There will be costs to those sites as well. Especially if
Sure.
those sites are not, they're,
Right.
these are not all
Okay.
shovel-ready sites.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Okay. Good. Anything else with that? Convenient and accessible traffic flow
That's for all of them.
and a judgment call that we make. Is that fair? Okay. Site preparation costs, environmental concerns.
I almost think you can fold that up into the one that we just talked with demolition costs, truly, because that all goes into preparing that site to be built, whether there's things on it.
I'd have a greater concern if we were looking at the dry cleaning corner for that environmental.
That's still part of the whole.
So you want me to put it in with this?
Well, I'm
and
just
remove
finding a way
that?
to, because I mean, it's the concept of, it's a site preparation
Okay.
period. Demolition goes
Okay.
into it perhaps, environmental concerns, there's remodeling costs, all of those things are part of the same concept.
Yeah, almost putting demolition with the site restoration, or
Yes.
site preparation
All
and
together.
environmental concerns,
Yep.
yeah.
Are we all okay with that? All right. Okay. Square footage per site, did we take care of that with this other one? Okay. Displacing the employees,
Was that alluding to moving from this location to a temporary location and back?
yep.
Is that? Well, I don't wanna say
I
it's,
think you have to leave that there.
I was gonna say, it may be part of a site preparation, but it's not, it's a subdivision.
Okay.
So my question would be, would we eliminate a site, of any of the sites that we have on the table right now, and now we have 5 on the table, would we eliminate any of the sites simply based on the fact that it's gonna cost $50,000 to move people?
People get moved no matter what we do, even if you do not agree with the facility, you still have to move.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, because so that's when that goes and applies over.
So we're taking that off?
Yeah,
I'm with
I
that.
think there's more, I think kind of like some of the other things, maybe on the employee side of it, but I think there's more to that cost than just maybe monetarily, like thinking about if we were to demolish this site and have to, for, 12 to 18 months, figure out what the puzzle is to relocate all of us while a new building is built on this site, I think that there's some efficiency costs that have to be thought about maybe in that situation.
How to get a hold of you, how to direct people to you, and
Yeah.
educate.
Because I don't think that there's necessarily one easy fix to having us all in one location. So you're breaking up engineering and public works and planning and finance and administrative and, where do we all go and how does that all go together?
What can I ask, is there a way then that perhaps staff can start to glean together exactly what that's going to entail?
I think
Because I mean, it's easy for me to go, oh, it's $50,000, but I need, if there's more pieces, I would love to know the puzzle pieces.
I think we
know-
had, there is a list that I put together, because he has talked with department heads quite a bit this week about that, of, places that we could go, places that you could lease. There's a couple solutions where we could all be in one location, but often that's going to be leasing from, a different current business to find all of that space. And then we've broken down, so it's after,
Yeah.
you see that, it's
It's in the temporary office space during construction.
yes, of new city hall, that would be
Yep.
for this current site. And so I know Ike has asked us to continually be thinking about that and what that solution might look like if that is a need. And we've toured some different, spaces that we currently own and how many people we could fit there, where we might all go kind of thing. But I think that page needs at least some weight in the discussion.
So I think it's something for us to consider, but I also see that as something we need to have a considerable conversation about down the road, okay? And choosing that as a final option. Okay, cost of the T1 lines, that we've got those dollar amounts estimated. High visibility, that'll be a subjective issue, right? Okay, and connected to the auditorium. It'll just be a low priority when we're saying yes or no's, okay? Are we all good with those being the priorities that we will evaluate the different sites on, based on? Any other thoughts in regard to something that's come to mind that we didn't originally put up here?
And I don't know where this fits in. I don't know if it's the catalyst thing, but when we build this, we talked about a 50 to 60-year-old building. I think we got to think about in the 50 to 60 years, and I know this is future thinking, visionary stuff. Is Willmar going to be a haven for people who want to retire? Do we have to think about it that way? Am I off track here? But I just want to have some vision that we're not just thinking about today, but we're looking about, okay, here's our population, this is what we're analyzing today, and this is where we're seeing the future. And I don't know, I'm just planting a seed. I just want to have that in our thought process, so that we don't build this building and say, oh, not convenient for me, and I'm 70 years old, you know? And
So
I
that'll
don't-
come out in the design phase.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Well, I would, since he says future, I would say, a maintenance plan for the facility afterwards, because
Thank you, that's
we
great.
wouldn't perhaps be in a situation had we done more effective use of that in the past.
That's great, that's great.
And
Well, I
that's
think
something
that-
we should be thinking about for all of our buildings.
Exactly, indeed. I was just like, we got the future idea.
And one thing I wanna do is point out, I mean, the council today is looking at these things, and regretfully, it had not been looked at in the past. And that's what's put us where we're at, and that is not that's not being critical of staff, because I know for a fact that a lot of this was brought to council, but the previous councils refused to address it. And so for this council to actually identify that as a requirement for being a continued progressive city, that's a big step. It's a big step from where we were 5 years ago.
Right.
So it is 12 after 1. When we get together next time then, what we'll do is put these in order of priority. We will get the feedback from staff for all the questions that we have. Then I'll put up the different sites that we have, those being the fire station, Block 25, current City Hall, Hardware Hank, 5th and Becker, and this is gonna be a lot of sites to be looking at, but then what we will simply do is identify, yes, this is important, no, this is not as important, or excuse me, for this particular item, it ranks high, it ranks in the middle, or it's low ranking, okay? Sound fair? All right, and then we'll have further discussion from there. We'll just sit back, take a look at the work we did, and have the real discussion come forward, okay? So I wanna close this with an I wish, excuse me, I wish, I wonder. This is the parking lot conversation when you go out to your car and you're chatting with the other person. I like, whatever. I wish, whatever. I wonder, whatever. You can choose one of those three, or you could choose all of them if you'd want to, but these are your parting thoughts. Popcorn whenever you're ready.
You know, I really like going through this process. I think it really helped get us moved from where we were. I think that we can give a very detailed report to the council, the other council members that aren't present, the other four, on what we're talking about. And I think that had we had these conversations the first time around, I think we maybe wouldn't have ended up in a deadline. So I really like this.
You want me to do this now?
Yep.
Well, I like that's very intentional. That, and it's all based, makes me much more happy is that it's more based on some actual quantitative things instead of an inclination that one has. And so I'm encouraged by this process. I think we have some real information to come in and we can do some data-driven decision.
I agree with the mayor. I like that we're kind of prioritizing. You're good at that. You've always been good at that, so that's good. I like that. You know, do you look around at at Wilmer and you know, there's other locations? I don't know, but we're moving forward. We're making decisions. So I wish I had a crystal ball.
Yeah.
You won't like the outcome.
I don't feel like I'm being helpful to this process right now, but I wish we could have had the Quick Trip property and had a site to consider, the community center and the city hall together in one site.
You might still be able to do it, Block 25.
Yeah.
Given that, does that change anything as far as information we are going to be asking for? Can we just ask Sarah, that as she's putting the building on the site, that you also do, if there would be a possibility of adding a community center, this is what it might, space it might take up, I don't know.
11,000 square feet.
Well, I personally don't like it, but you can certainly look at it.
Should it have been an item up here? Okay. That goes right along with the auditorium, connected to the auditorium.
You know, you could write it down and we could visit about it the next time around. You know, I don't know.
Do we all agree that that's a low priority?
Well, I don't know that we'll all agree to that, Kathy. I think that you might come to some consensus with that. You know, I think this is an area where, what Fernando said earlier, you know, when you go to the community and ask them, what does that look like to them?
Right.
Because I think when we talk about it, we have our own feelings, but when you go to the community might have a different opinion of that than we do.
Right.
Like what you were saying earlier.
Honestly, the community, at least the senior community, has made very clear that they would like to remain where they're at. We also have now a funding source for the local option sales tax to fund the community center, and currently we do not have one here. So I say that muddies the water and creates something when we said we need to be downtown, and a large faction that uses that facility said they don't want to be downtown. It may be one of those, as you call it, a rabbit hole, but that's why I don't like it. I liked it originally when we started talking about this long ago, but I think the train has left the station at the community center. I think the community has chimed in on it, and now we even have a funding source to pay for it. So I don't like
Okay.
that. I think it muddies the water for me personally.
Since you are the one who brought it up, do I remove it? Or how are you feeling?
Well, I still kind of go back to, where's it gonna go? But when we talk about all of our facilities at different places, so we have a complex out by the Civic Center, we've got the community center all by itself, and then we have our city functions downtown. It just doesn't make sense to me for it to be there, and the only reason they kind of like, part of the reason they like that location now is because they can access it safely off of the back road. But they're still having to deal with 71, and it's familiar, and I get that. But, yeah, it could come off, it was an I wish.
Okay.
I wish.
Well, that was the purpose for this, is that parking lot conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
I wish they could be together.
I wished that.
Nice, big, beautiful lot.
But you know, I think that then, and I don't wanna take us, this is definitely a rabbit hole. But that really brings up the conversation about moving the community center to Robbins Island. Because now you're starting to bring those services together, where then you have a staff member on the island to oversee what's happening there. And,
Thank you for that, and we'll let the local option sales tax have that conversation. Sarah, do you have an I wish, I wonder?
I like this process that we did. I think it was very, very helpful and moving forward.
how about you?
Yeah, yourself.
Mine would be an I wish we had all council members' voices at the table. Because I hate to think we go through this process, for them not to understand what we've done, to not have buy-in with whatever the end result comes out to be. So, I wish everyone were present, because it's a big decision.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that we've been tasked with it.
Well, I don't know if it's, in our meeting, there's no reason why you can't, when you summarize what has happened here, to send that out to all of the council members. Then maybe they can give us some feedback about the priorities that you've generated here, and give us some feedback on that as well. There's no reason that can't happen.
Maybe you or Julie could do that during the council members' comments on Monday night, just to bring the rest of the council members along to where we're at. I mean, these minutes, I'm assuming, are gonna go in the council packets, so that, I mean, they'll be able to review those, but, I mean, this is important, what we did today. We got a long way down the road, in my opinion.
All right, it is 1:20,
10 minutes early.
meeting adjourned.
Good
Thank you.
job.